This is Distant Replay. We're watching the Mike Tyson documentary. I don't know if you've seen it because I don't feel like it's been advertised that much. I wasn't that aware that it was airing as a two-part series on ABC, but ABC News produced this Mike Tyson, the Knockout documentary, two-part series on his life and career. And I got to say, I think they should have hyped it more because there's a lot you can get into with Mike Tyson, so this probably doesn't dive into everything. But just watching the first part of this two-part series, this is really good, and I learned a lot.
This is a really well-done documentary, and I can't, but the first time I heard of it, Ben, was you texted me a couple days ago and said, hey, let's do the Tyson documentary. And I was like, where is it even airing?
Yeah.
You know? And yeah, between the lack of publicity for it and like what kind of made them do a Mike Tyson documentary. Like I'm a little unclear on that. You know, this seems like a lot of years you could have done a Mike Tyson documentary. Why now? But I'm glad they did. They did as we'll get to, this first episode was excellent.
Yeah, I was like, I think I just stumbled across it flipping through the TV. I just saw it on ABC a couple nights ago and just looked it up and was like, oh, this is a two-part series. Let me see if we can actually watch it. And there it was. And yeah, I kind of agree. Like, you know, late May, early June, like why not at least, if not tied into Tyson himself, why not around like a big fight? Because there's a couple of big heavyweight fights coming up this year that, you know, you could at least tie it into in some respect while people are thinking about boxing. But here we are, and I'm glad we're watching it because it's very good. This first part of two parts takes us from his early life up into the Buster Douglas fight, which we all know about. So this is the core of his life, and there's so much happens here that we got to dive into, and we got a lot of questions we're going to get to tonight, and a lot of the things that we learned tonight that we weren't aware of with Mike Tyson. The Robin Givens interview. Oh boy. I mean, there's so much to get into here. We're going to do that on the podcast. If you haven't joined us before, distantreplaypodcast.com is the website. Catch us on Twitter, Instagram, and then YouTube as well. Please subscribe, follow us on whatever podcasting app you choose to use, and like, leave us a comment. We try to read all of them that we come in. So I'm sure you'll have thoughts on this documentary if you haven't watched it already. But again, as Mike mentioned, it's on ABC, so you can go to abc.com, or I think it's on Hulu as well. So either one of those two options, you'll find it there. I watched on abc.com with commercials, unfortunately, but that's the price you pay. So this documentary, let's just start with his upbringing. It opens with his fight with Spinks in Atlantic City, kind of setting the stage, but then it brings us all the way back to his upbringing. And the person that's in this and kind of, I wouldn't say narrates it, but it's kind of like a lot of the voice of this documentary is Rosie Perez. And she's in it early and often. And I'm not quite sure what the connection is. I know she's from Brooklyn, but is there any other deeper connection there?
If there is, I'm not aware of it. And I will admit, like when they showed her, I was like, is that Rosie Perez? And then you hear her talk and it's like, oh yeah, that's Rosie Perez. You know, she's a very distinct voice. And her and Tyson, by the way, very distinct voices. But she was like very knowledgeable on the subject of Mike Tyson. But they didn't really say what their connection was at all. But she is in this documentary a lot.
She's in it throughout,
probably,
yeah.
She's probably one of the most featured people talking about Mike Tyson in the entire episode. And I was just like, I couldn't help but like laugh when I saw her. I kept on seeing her because like she was, you think Rosie Perez, White Men Can't Jump, and the way she was in that movie. And now she's talking very knowledgeable about like the career of Mike Tyson and the life of Mike Tyson. So it was kind of, it's kind of unique from that perspective.
Yeah, she was commenting on like every aspect of his life from like early childhood up until, you know, the relationships and the fights and everything. But the first thing you know about Mike Tyson and you learn more about is his upbringing, right? Tough upbringing, a mom that is doing a lot of, she's drinking, she's out at night, she's bringing home men. He's made fun of a lot as a child, and they're living in a section of Brooklyn. And I'm not familiar with the different sections and neighborhoods in Brooklyn, Mike. Maybe you are a little bit more. But all I know about Brooklyn now is like it's become a trendy place to live, right, over the last 15, 20 years. But you see pictures of where he came from, Brownsville, where they had to move to, I think when he was really young. It's pretty rough, man. Like it's as bad as like it looks almost like a third world country.
Yeah, we're talking Brownsville, in the 70s and 80s, right?
Yeah.
Very, very rough area, Ben. Like I'm talking about as rough as you can imagine. They did a very good job in this documentary of portraying exactly what day-to-day life was like there for Mike Tyson and the other people that live there. We get perspective from Shannon Briggs, who was another boxer, I think people will know that name, who I did not realize grew up in the same neighborhood as Mike Tyson.
Well, they're like, and didn't Riddick Bowe grow up in Brooklyn too? Didn't they font that? I was shocked at how many boxers came out of Brooklyn during that era.
Yeah, and then we're talking Shannon Briggs like grew up like the street over from him.
Yeah.
And Shannon Briggs did a great job of describing like there's one door to get through and there's 50,000 people trying to get through it to get out of Brownsville. You know what I mean? Like portrayed it very well. They used to call Mike Tyson Dirty Ike back in the day because he just had like very poor hygiene because he was so poor and everything like that. He got beat up a lot. Like you said, his mother was an alcoholic also. And this all leads to something Mike Tyson, I think, is known for today. I didn't realize he started it when he was younger, was raising pigeons.
Mm-hmm. I didn't realize that either. I thought it was more of a thing he kind of took on as an adult. But they explained it was kind of his escape. Gave him some kind of control, and he kind of he had something to kind of latch onto in love, I guess. Like that missing element of his life. But the crazy story from this documentary is that he's, again, you said it, he's being bullied a lot as a younger kid. Can you imagine bullying Mike Tyson? But he's like with his pigeons, and another kid comes up and is just wants to mess with him, right? And takes one of his pigeons and literally wrings its neck, pulls its head off. I mean, just think about that. Like picture that
Brutal.
as like a child, and this is like the environment he's living in. And like throws it on the floor, and then that's when Mike Tyson kind of snapped. And I'm just thinking, like, can you imagine that kid like to do that? Number one, but just to change Mike's life. And they're like, in the documentary, this is kind of where things changed for him. He basically just pounded the dude, and from there, I guess, kind of gained some of that confidence. And this, it kind of changed his mindset, and he started hanging out with kind of a rough element.
Yeah, hey, look, man, word gets around when someone does like that, something like that to you, and a neighborhood like that, and you stand up for yourself, and you do what Mike Tyson apparently did to the guy. They said it was a turning point in his life. He started hanging out with a rougher crowd, like you said. He got into crime. Tyson estimates he got arrested like 30 times growing up when he was really young. This all leads to probably, I would say, been the major turning point in his life, where because of his behavior, they send him to a camp in upstate New York for like wayward kids. Mm-hmm. And from there, he meets the people that would sort of plant the seeds for him to become, heavyweight champion of the world.
See, this is like, I kind of knew, I was vaguely familiar with the people involved in his life, but I didn't realize a lot of the story. So this was all very interesting to me, and I learned a lot from this like time period because I knew of Customato and I knew of all that, but I didn't know how it all kind of unfolded and how much of its life it was. But he gets to this juvenile center Tryon. It's where he meets a guy named Bobby Patterson who's a boxer, and Mike decides to take it up, and Bobby kind of lays into him early on, and he just like immediately clicks. Like I think the greats of any, not just sports, but in any like aspect of life. If you like, it seems like you're just kind of born with that, right? When you find it and you find that gift, or there's something that you really are that passionate about, it just clicks automatically. And you see that with him at a young age, and he just takes it up, and they see his talent right away. And they say, we need to take this further and introduce you to this old trainer in upstate New York in the Catskills, Customato, who's just kind of training young kids now on top of a police station. Like his career is basically over, and he's just kind of doing what he loves, but has no future. And this kind of rejuvenates everything. But we're talking, again, to give you a sense of the time frame here, arrested 30 times, doing this boxing. He's still like around 10, 11, 12 years old when all this is happening. I mean, you think of a kid like this, you think of 15, 16 getting into trouble. Dude, we're talking 10 or 12 years old, even to the point where when he gets here and they're admiring how big and strong and powerful this dude is, and they couldn't believe that he was 12 years old. And you see the pictures, and they actually have video of this training center, which, again, is incredible. It's amazing that he looks unlike any 12-year-old that you ever see.
Yeah, and could you imagine, like you said, picking on him?
That's the crazy part. Is it's not like he's grown in size in the last year or two. This is kind of who he is.
Yeah, he's 12 years old. He goes up to the Catskills, to Catskill, where Customato's, like you said, his gym is based out of. And they basically look at Mike Tyson as like a beautiful piece of granite that is like you can't teach what he has, right? Strong, powerful, and now they just need to chisel him into like a fighter. You know what I mean? To make the perfect piece of granite, or in this case, the perfect fighter. Mm-hmm. And they begin a process of sort of teaching him how to box. And at the forefront of that is Cus D'Amato, like you mentioned. At this point, Cus is like 72 years old, I think they said. And another younger trainer named, I think everyone will know, is Teddy Atlas, who was in this documentary and who was very instrumental in the early days of Mike Tyson.
Yeah, and there's some really interesting stories here that are good in this documentary. Just him moving in with D'Amato and the other kids that are the other, I guess, boxers that he was raising in his house, and Mike just kind of getting structure from the first time and getting kind of that love and sitting around a dinner table and having dinner and, just trying to be on his best behavior. There's some very interesting stories. Like the guy was he had a tough upbringing, man. Like you can tell, like he's dealing with a lot and just trying to figure out a lot in this childhood. But he's watching old like boxing films, which Jack Dempsey was his favorite. I didn't realize that.
Yeah, I had no clue.
I would have thought like Muhammad Ali or any of the greats in the 50s, 60s, and 70s there.
Yeah, he's really becoming like he's basically learning the sport from the ground up, and that's all he's doing. He's completely absorbed in the sport. He's not his no more. He even talks about it in this where he's not distracted by all the things we talked about before that were going on in Brownsville.
Yeah, and D'Amato. I kind of I go back and forth on, they present D'Amato as a guy that obviously kind of accepts and embraces Tyson, right? Kind of raises him as his son. They have this relationship. But on the other side, you hear some other opinions about how he's kind of taking advantage of the situation and kind of sees it probably from a monetary standpoint and a profit standpoint. How do you feel about it? Like, I definitely don't know enough to really kind of form a true opinion. It just seems like on the outside, it seems like he had the best intentions. Sure, he saw the potential here, but I don't know that he would have cast Mike Tyson aside had Mike Tyson not had talent in the ring.
Yeah, I don't think every kid in that house that was living with Cus D'Amato and his I don't think it was his wife, it was his partner I guess they called her. I don't think everyone who was living in that house was a potential heavyweight champion of the world.
Right.
So if you're going to say that, then explain the reason why he took all those other kids in as well. Did he want to take advantage of training a champion, a potential champion? Of course he did. He's a boxing trainer. You know what I mean? It never even entered my mind that Cus D'Amato's main motivation was, I'm going to use this kid to make money. That never entered my mind until some people talked about it in this documentary.
Yeah, but he sees the potential out of Tyson, and they're hammering home to him, you're the next heavyweight champion, and just forming that confidence in his mind throughout this. But also in this training facility is Teddy Atlas. Now everybody's aware of Teddy Atlas. He's been around the sport forever. One of the I guess probably top 3 most well-known figures in boxing. And he's taken on the training here too, and becoming very close with Tyson. And I don't know, there's a couple things from Atlas that I'm want to quickly talk about. I guess he was really close with Tyson. Like you even see that when Tyson goes out to Colorado Springs for the first time, like the junior, I guess, Team USA training facility, and he's fighting for the first time. It seems like competitively, and like they're very close. You can tell like they have this relationship, and that's kind of his support system there. But then you also hear that Atlas takes kind of an opposite approach of D'Amato when Tyson's getting a little bit bigger in school and like kind of dealing with some issues. I guess a lot of what teenagers are kind of going through, but with Tyson's background and kind of rough upbringing, he's a lot rougher around the edges. And Atlas says that he's trying to he thinks they should take kind of a stand about it, rather than Atlas was just kind of letting it go because of who he is, and became good cop, bad cop to the point where it eventually fractured their relationship.
Yeah, you put it perfectly. Teddy Atlas being the bad cop, Cus D'Amato making always finding a way to make it sound like it was okay that he can that Tyson can get past whatever issues he was having in school, etc. And this developed a little bit of a rift between Atlas and Tyson as the years went on. You could see it, right? Hey, look, this guy's always busting my stones. I'm progressing well as a boxer. I'm on the brink of potentially becoming, a champion, but he just won't stop about this other stuff that he thinks I'm doing wrong, Yeah. And this all leads to the incident that Teddy Atlas describes involving his sister-in-law. Were you aware of this incident before we watched this?
I don't think so. This was pretty new to me. I probably have heard it, but yeah, when he was going through it, did not remember it.
All right. So for those of you who don't know this incident, so I knew parts of this, but never the full story. So we're getting this right from Teddy Atlas, by the way. And it's something Tyson would later confirm in later years, right? So Teddy Atlas tells a story about how he was married, had a sister-in-law who was 11 years old. So I always thought it was his daughter because the person was 11 years old, but it was his sister-in-law. Yeah. And the sister-in-law came and told him that Tyson basically groped her, touched her when she didn't want to be touched. Mm-hmm. And Teddy Atlas basically got his gun, approached Tyson, stuck the gun in Tyson's ear, and told him, if you touch her again, I'll kill you. Tyson gave him, what Teddy Atlas says, Tyson gave him like a little bit of a smirk. Yeah. And Teddy Atlas cocked the gun, had his finger on the trigger, right in Tyson's ear, brought the gun above Tyson's head, shot it in the air. Tyson fell to the ground, sort of, like a gun just got shot in my ear. I can't hear. Mm-hmm. And that was the last association Teddy Atlas ever had with Mike Tyson. So we have a situation now where Teddy Atlas is now out of the picture due to this incident, and we have Cus D'Amato training Mike Tyson.
Yeah, Tyson's 15 at this time. I mean, and it's not really backing down. And I don't know, man. If you know at all about the background of Atlas, he literally might have been close to killing Mike Tyson.
I mean, Ben, he had the gun to his ear, cocked with his finger on the trigger, and he made it sound like the last minute he sort of rose the gun up and shot above his head.
Yeah, and this is a guy in Atlas who served time on Rikers Island.
I did not know that.
When he was younger, he was arrested several times and was a part of an armed robbery, which led him to Rikers Island. So, and are you familiar with that the scar on his face? Like why he got
I'm familiar with the scar, not how he got it.
So I was looking that up too. He was involved in a street fight in Staten Island, which he was slashed with this knife. The wound took 400 stitches to close, 200 on the inside and 200 on the outside, which I didn't even know you could stitch up the inside. And that's what left him with that scar. So when I read that and then pictured this scenario, I'm sitting there thinking this is probably a very a legitimate chance that this ended up in death for Mike Tyson. Like hearing his background, like this guy was kind of troubled, much like Mike Tyson was.
Yeah, you believe Teddy Atlas when he's telling this story.
Yeah,
you don't. It never entered my mind one time. Oh, maybe he's embellishing a little bit.
Mm-hmm. So that kind of was one turning point early on in Mike Tyson's career, and the next kind of turning point is Mike Tyson starting to get competitive and fighting. Cus D'Amato dies. So again, this whole time frame, I just didn't know the background of Mike Tyson too much, but very interesting to see kind of how much of an impact Cus D'Amato has. And I always heard he kind of helped raise him, but he literally was his father. And when Cus died, that was the first big turning point for his life, one of the biggest ones.
Yeah, Cus D'Amato died in 1985, and now Tyson's lost Teddy Atlas. He's lost Cus D'Amato. Thankfully, they had someone in Jim Jacobs to sort of manage Tyson and keep him on the right path as he sort of, again, is rising through the ranks of the heavyweight division as this is going on. So he's young now, but he's rising through the ranks of the heavyweight division. I think at this point, at Cus's death, he's like 17, 18 years old. Mm-hmm. And this is all leading to a fight with Trevor Berbick when he's 21 years old. So he's going to fight Trevor Berbick for a heavyweight champ, one of the heavyweight belts. And, at this point, what surprised me, Ben, was that I didn't realize that Teddy Atlas and Cus D'Amato, both for different reasons, were out of the picture even before Tyson fought for a heavyweight championship.
Yeah, that was new to me too. And that fight came a year later with Berbick, and it was a dominant performance. I mean, another one that, if you remember it all during this period, I mean, it was almost every fight was a first round knockout or second round knockout. I mean, it changed the way my expectations for boxers, Mike, because I think now we get upset a lot with these heavyweights. They're just kind of slower moving. They work a lot. The fights go 7, 8, 10, 12 rounds, the distance. And you kind of long for these days when Tyson would just come out a different animal altogether and just attack these guys early on. And you didn't have to wait for anything. There was action. It was intense from the jump. And that's why he became must-see TV. and everyone wanted to see his fights, whether in person, if you could get a ticket, which was nearly impossible because every celebrity wanted to, or just like the pay-per-view. And I remember these pay-per-views, like my dad and my friends' parents, like dads wanting to buy the fights and us kind of watching him from the background when he was in his heyday. It made a ton of money.
Oh, just gobs of money. Tyson beats Burbick to become a heavyweight championship again. Not undisputed, but one of the belts of heavyweight championship at only 21 years old. He becomes a megastar, like Ben said. His pay-per-views are must-watch. He's got that trademark look with no robe coming into the ring. Just
all business.
All business. But black shoes when he's fighting, black trunks. Just no pomp and circumstance. Let's just get it on and let's go. And it becomes his trademark. At this time, Ben, Mike Tyson's Punch-Out comes out as well, which I think is a video game. It's one of the most iconic video games there is, probably. I would probably put it top. If you're talking about, vintage video games, I'm not talking about World of Warcraft or whatever weird games they play now. I'm talking like, video games you grow up on and that made the medium popular.
Yeah.
Mike Tyson's Punch-Out is on everyone's list. And Ben, I have to ask you, did you ever beat Mike Tyson or no?
I never did.
Neither did I. That's how hard the game was. I'm sure you played it for countless hours like I did, but
there was a couple of games back in the day that just frustrated the crap out of me. And that was one of them. But there was a cheat code, which is cool about a lot of those games back in the day. If you ever found the cheat code, you could just skip right to Mike Tyson and fight him. But yeah, I don't think I ever did fight him or beat him. And I try to do it like the right way, like progressing boxer by boxer, right, to get to the end.
Yeah, Ben's like, I'm starting with Glass Joe. Joe, and we're going from there.
Going all the way. But yeah, I mean, and if you weren't around in that era, or weren't like that was, again, as you mentioned, kind of the time we're starting to really remember a lot of sports. Tyson was huge, dude. I mean, Tyson was one of the biggest names in the world in sports, and they pointed out, along with Michael Jordan and Michael Jackson, were three of the biggest names at the time in America, maybe in all of the world at that point. But Tyson, legitimately, we laugh about it now because he's kind of created this new image and this new career around acting and whatnot. But I mean, this was a bad man back in the day.
Bad man back in the day. He's friends with celebrities. They've made it sound like he's partying with celebrities one night and he's in the ghetto partying the next night. So Still keeping his ties to Brownsville. Friends with Anthony Michael Hall, which I did not see coming.
Yeah, I didn't either.
Anthony Michael Hall is in this, the child actor, that I think we'll all know. If you look up Anthony Michael Hall, you'll recognize him right away.
Yeah, Breakfast Club,
of course. Yep. And this leads to him meeting a young actress at the time named Robin Givens. And I don't know if you want to get into Robin Givens now, Ben, or
let's jump into it because it's obviously a huge part of Tyson's life and really a surprising part of this documentary because I think that interview's kind of just been forgotten about. That should be talked about a lot more because this thing was not only was it that opened the floodgates and revealed a lot of what was happening inside Mike's home because there was a lot of talk about, is there domestic violence going on inside this house? Is Tyson's aggression and anger pouring over and is he letting it out on her? And there were some rumors, some talk about that. And Tyson basically just said, I'll grab her sometimes and maybe shake her a little bit, but never hit her. And they show this interview, and Barbara Walters, again, if you're not familiar with that time, if Barbara Walters was around, she was getting the truth. She was a huge deal. She was the top interviewer in the country on a platform where, you're only watching this show once a week. There's not interviews happening all the time. So if you were on the show, it was a huge PR push for you. And that's what this was meant to be, right? And they're showing his home and everything.
Yep.
Dude, I had no idea that she was not even supposed to be a part of this whole interview.
Yeah, so Robin Givens and Tyson are married at this time. And like Ben said, Hugh Downs and Barbara Walters, this is 2020, right? I mean, like if you grew up when we did, that's what you watched for like big interviews, right? They've said it in this, like if you're sitting on the couch with Barbara Walters, you're probably trying to rehab your image. Leading up to the interview, in no uncertain order, these are the incidents Tyson was involved in and why he felt the need to sit on the couch with Barbara Walters and rehab his image. He literally broke a guy's face fighting him in the street. Did you see that picture, Ben, they showed?
Yeah, that was crazy.
Yeah, they showed the guy's face. He broke a guy's face, punching him in the face. He attempted suicide, supposedly. They show him coming out to go into the ambulance with Robin Givens telling the cameras to go away. And he literally threw something at a news crew that was taping him when he was running training. This all happens. Things all happen in very close succession to each other. That leads up to this interview. I had no recollection, Ben, I'm on the same page as you, that Robin Givens was not supposed to be a part of this interview because the only clips you ever seen played from this interview throughout the years was what she said.
Right. Yeah. It just seemed like it was just, hey, it's a sit down, an exclusive interview with Robin Givens opening up. But it was one of these things where she kind of set it up as like she went around the property. Everything looked fine. Everything looked on the up and up. I think Tyson suspected nothing. And then she just sat down and was like, all right, let me share everything. And it did. Listen, I've got nothing to say about what actually happened there. I believe everything she said. But the way she presents everything, it just, to me, it always felt like she was acting. Like she was always kind of over the top with the way she was saying things. Like I almost like felt like it was a performance, and not to say like that nothing happened or that she was lying. I don't believe that. It just felt like a performance, and maybe that was just her way of getting it out there in a very, very tough situation. But it was just a very odd, a very, very uncomfortable situation.
Yeah, like Ben said, like I'm not doubting what she had to say in the interview. But the fact that she just like kind of inserted herself in, Mike Tyson's sitting there. This is a legendary interview if you've never seen it. Mike Tyson's sitting there absolutely stone-faced and like glazed over. Like, I can't believe she's doing this right now. I mean, she said things like she was afraid of him, that, he's manic depressive, that, some of the physical things that he had done to her. This was a big deal when it came out. Again, we're talking about at this point now, the undisputed heavyweight champion of the world, one of the most popular people in the world, and his wife is on national TV saying this about him, right while sitting right next to him. And, oh man. And I don't, there was obviously major blowback from this. She got a lot of blowback from it. And I honestly, Ben, I can't remember seeing Robin Givens since.
Yeah, I mean, I assume she's been around, but yeah, this was this didn't help her out either, for good or bad. It is what happened. But yeah, that whole interview was incredible, and to get the producers' take on it as well was very interesting to kind of hear their perspective. But yeah, it kind of changed everything, and this was right around the time of the pinnacle of Mike Tyson's career, and I think this was kind of the first part of him this kind of maybe accelerated him getting off track and kind of the downfall of his early rise. And again, we're still talking a guy that's 22 years old at this point. I mean, still super young.
Yeah, super, super young. So Ben, what I learned from this is there's certain things that highlight sort of Mike Tyson in his early life, right? There's Cus D'Amato's death, the Teddy Atlas incident, like we talked about, Jim Jacobs dying, we should mention. Jim Jacobs dies before he even fights Michael Spinks. In between when he beat Berbick and when he fought Spinks, Jim Jacobs dies, his manager. Then that allows Don King to start sinking his tentacles into Mike Tyson. So I think that's a major issue. The Robin Givens interview, of course. And it is it's just like a pin you put in it, like you said, where, wow, this is when things really started to turn for him.
Yeah, this was a few months before he fought Spinks?
This was a few months after he fought Spinks.
A few months after he fought Spinks.
Yeah, so the Spinks fight, for anyone who doesn't remember, Ben, I don't know about you, but this is the first major sporting event I could remember watching.
Yeah, I don't. I mean, I think I kind of remember watching it, but yeah, this is right around the time where I'm definitely paying attention to what's happening. Because I remember the Robin Givens thing, like a little bit, like hearing the headlines. Like I can like literally remember being in elementary school. Like my vision is of going to like the PE class, but like hearing about it somewhere. I don't remember how this all plays out, but like it's coming back to me about where I saw this. So this is all kind of when we're really paying attention to what's happening out there. And he's a huge deal at this point. And yeah, this is all kind of right around the time of him being at his peak too, which makes this story even more incredible. But yeah, that fight with Spinks was impressive. And I think he's taken out a lot of his anger just in life and his personal life out on Spinks. And of course you see Donald Trump, who hosted the fight in Atlantic City, paid $11 million to host the fight. I'm sure he got plenty of return on that money, but you saw the crowd and just how many people want to be involved in that. It just kind of summed it up. It was pretty interesting to go back to, but now knowing everything that's going on around that fight, there's a lot to process. Yeah.
Now Don King is involved with Mike Tyson now, right?
Yeah.
He's, We get some background on Don King in this as well, a lot of which I knew. I don't know if any of that was new to you, Ben.
I think the only thing new was just kind of how he kind of inserted himself and how he kind of took over when the opportunity. Like he was a very opportunist with everything he did, and this was another perfect example of that.
Yeah, so basically when Jim Jacobs died, who was the manager of Mike Tyson, after Cus D'Amato and Teddy Atlas were out of the picture, after Jim Jacobs died, Tyson was at a low point, and Don King sees that opportunity, became his manager. He's the manager for the fight against Spinks, which again was a huge fight. Tyson knocked him out in 91 seconds, which again is a number. If you're a boxing fan, you'll remember 91 seconds. And then you have the Robin Givens interview in September of '88. Now we're leading up to the Buster Douglas fight in 1990.
By the way, before you get to Buster Douglas, did you enjoy Tyson's limo driver during all this?
Yeah, he was really good. I'd seen him in something else before, but he's a very informed on Tyson. He was there for a lot. He was sitting shotgun for a lot of this stuff.
The reason I thought about that is because he had a comment after that Spinks fight about how he was trying to park the limo, and by the time he got settled, Tyson was hopping back in, still hands wrapped, like, all right, let's get out of here. He's like, what happened? The guy's like, and Tyson was, and he even did a Tyson impression too, which was hilarious. The guy's done. The guy's done. And
it's over. He said it's over. Let's get out of here. That's what he said. Yeah. We do not have good Mike Tyson impressions.
No, but that guy was tremendous, and he definitely defended Tyson throughout this entire thing, and it's good. I mean, Tyson needs somebody to defend him as well during this because you hear some sides of it, but it's always good to hear both sides. But yeah, this is the kind of the spiral for him. And it's funny because they showed that 1988 All-Star game, which we did a podcast on the dunk competition, and they said that Tyson and Givens were there, and we specifically were talking about during the episode of why weren't there weren't any celebrities they showed, it was just all about the actual dunk competition. Now this a spectacle, and I guess the whole time there was Tyson and Givens were probably in the second row. We just never saw them. I just thought that was interesting to tie that back into it. For me, going back in time.
There were rumors though, Ben, also that she dated Jordan the year before.
Yeah.
She dated Jordan the year before, and now she's at the dunk contest with Mike Tyson. So there was that going on too, which I wasn't aware of.
So let's get to Buster Douglas, close this thing out, because this is where the first part ends. Fight in Tokyo. He's going over there. This is, again, Tyson's cruising through his career. At this point, he's sitting at 37-0. This is in late 89, going into early 90, where the fight was. They're going overseas. Don King, obviously, selling this fight, trying to make a bunch of money. This was going to be an easy fight against Buster Douglas, who, a good fighter, but absolutely nothing spectacular going into this fight against Tyson. I mean, this is a guy that he'd won a few fights. He'd beaten Burbick, but, he'd still lost to some guys you never heard of. So he went into this fight as a 42-1 underdog. And I think everybody that talks about this upset talks about the odds, because boxing was one of the few sports that were, gambling was front and center in this day and age. And that was the biggest thing. But even Douglas, who was in this, said, I probably should have been 1,000-1.
Yeah, and look, this Buster Douglas fight, I'm glad they hit on this in the documentary, because I think it's important to remember. Mike Tyson's one of the biggest stars in the world right now. And this fight in Tokyo was an afterthought. It wasn't even on everyone's radar, because It was in Tokyo, first of all, and mostly because of who he was fighting. It was thought to be like an exhibition, kind of a joke, like Tyson's just going over to Tokyo to make some money. He's going to knock out this guy when he's there and come back. Mm-hmm. I remember, do you remember, Ben, I remember hearing about this the morning after it happened.
Yeah.
Just hearing about it from a family member. Hey, did you hear Mike Tyson lost? And my first reaction was, I didn't even know he was fighting. It wasn't even publicized,
Yeah.
And then I remember seeing it on tape delay. I don't know if it was the next night or the next week on HBO. It might have been that night. They played it a day later or something, because it was in Tokyo, and just being shocked. This is one of the biggest. We'll have to do this for the podcast, for our one of our games or events, because this was truly one of the big. It's the biggest boxing upset ever. I don't think it's even close.
Yep.
And you remember Tyson. The what you remember from this fight is Tyson fumbling around for his mouthpiece after Buster Douglas knocks him down, I believe, in the 10th round.
Yep.
And he's fumbling around for his mouthpiece, can't find it, finally finds it, puts it in his mouth halfway, gets up, clearly has no clue where he is, and then the ref calls the fight. And just crazy scene.
And they told the story of leading up to this. Tyson's basically out every night, not training, just out partying every night, leading up to this fight. While Buster Douglas just lost his mom, he's like super focused, trying to draw on that energy, and he's training hard. He's working during the day, sleeping at night. Like they're going in opposite directions, preparing for this fight. And it's kind of one of those things where like the perfect kind of storm had to happen for this upset to happen, and it did. And you saw early in the fight, I mean, Tyson's getting hit, which he never really did in that day and age, and you could tell from the beginning that something's different here, and eventually Douglas knocked him out. But yeah, that name Buster Douglas will always be a name you'll remember because of this fight. You said it. The biggest boxing upset ever, and no one believed it even had a chance of happening, and still hard to believe even to this day with how dominant he was leading up to that it even got to that point. It truly is hard to believe, but that changed everything, and that's where this documentary part 1 ends. So we'll go from here into kind of the second. You can almost call it the second half of his career, right? I mean, maybe even less than that. We're kind of well beyond that first half in terms of record and fights and stuff. At this point, he's now 37-1. But I think the other big takeaway from this is I truly forgot how young Mike Tyson was through all this. I mean, when he loses this fight, his 38th professional fight, he's not even 24 years old yet.
Yeah, I know. I didn't realize the ages either. I didn't realize that he beat Trevor Berbick when he was 21. Yeah. I had no clue on that. So that's what sort of piqued me. Like, man, wow, I can't believe how young he was. But yeah, next episode, Ben, I would assume gets into, in no certain order, like his legal troubles, his comeback after he gets out of prison, the biting incident with Holyfield, and then sort of his reemergence into pop culture as being someone I think people have an entirely different opinion of now than maybe they did during this era.
Yeah, I'm curious to see where this goes because they did point out, like, back then, he got arrested for rape, right? And his image has been pretty clean since then, and people are big fans of him. So I'm curious how the direction this thing goes from here. But I thought this first part was outstanding, and I learned a ton throughout it. And I don't know why it hasn't been published or publicized a little bit more than it has and promoted, but hopefully you're seeing this and listening to this and saying, I want to go watch it because I think it's well worth the time.
Yeah, I mean, we've had some heavy hitters on documentaries. We did The Last Dance on here. We did Tiger Woods, and now Mike Tyson. And Mike Tyson was that big of a name. Like, make no mistake about it. You may think like, oh, you're comparing him to Tiger Woods and Michael Jordan. But he was a huge name, and I think this is going to be the documentary people go back on if they ever want like a snapshot of Mike Tyson's life and career.
Yeah, and I'm shocked.
It's that good.
I'm shocked that like Tyson wasn't a 30 for 30. And this is all, under the same umbrella with ABC. Like, I'm surprised ESPN didn't lead this and make it and you could probably do a 4 or 5 part series on Tyson with everything that happened, especially in his early life,
Easily. Look, what we went through today, the Spinks fight could be a large part of one episode. The Robin Givens saga could be a large, the relationship with Cus D'Amato could be a huge part of an episode.
The Douglas upset.
The Douglas upset. Yeah. We briefly went over like 3 or 4 major stories of the day. Like when this stuff happened, it was world news.
Huge, yeah. So highly recommend it. Again, you can find it on abc.com or on Hulu if you're looking for it. Please subscribe to the show. We will do the second part. That'll be out next week. We also have True Crime coming up. We got Gam we're going to go back and watch. So plenty still on the horizon. Please subscribe, follow the show. We appreciate all the support. And always send us any recommendations you have.
Yeah, as always, guys, much appreciated. Like, subscribe, comment, and until next time.